There was a poster on a wall outside the Chatuchak market in Bangkok in the spring of 1969, and I stopped walking when I saw it. I don't know why I stopped. I see 1,000 posters on 1,000 walls. Something about this one made me stop. It said 50,000 baht to anyone who could survive 10 seconds against Juanita Srisuk. It said 143 men had tried. It said none of them had collected. It said the event was on Saturday at the sports complex near the old stadium. Admission was 30 baht. I was 25 years old. I was living in Bangkok on a teacher's salary, and 30 baht was real money for me. I paid it. My name is Somchai Ratna. I am 82 years old. I paid 30 baht on a Thursday afternoon in 1969, and what I watched that Saturday is the story I am about to tell you.
The sports complex near the old stadium was not a famous venue. It held about 800 people on a good night, with wooden bleacher seating and a raised concrete floor area where the ring was set up. And on Saturday afternoons in the rainy season, it had the specific dense heat of a covered outdoor space, where the air doesn't move unless someone moves it. The poster had done its work and the place was close to capacity by the time I arrived at noon, maybe 2 hours before the main event started. I had heard of Juanita Srisuk before the poster. In Bangkok in the late 1960s, if you followed combat sports with any seriousness, you had heard of her. She had been competing since she was 17, which was 12 years by 1969, and in those 12 years, she had built something that the men who covered the sport for Thai newspapers described in ways that were uncommon for a woman in that context, which is to say, they described it the way they would describe any serious competitor who had produced extraordinary results over a long time. She was 29 years old. She was 5 feet 7, which was tall for a Thai woman of her generation, and she weighed approximately 60 kilograms. She had begun in the women's Muay Thai circuit, which was smaller and less official than the men's circuit, but was real and was serious, and she had exhausted that circuit by her early 20s. No one would fight her, the usual experience of a champion who has beaten everyone in their category. So she had moved to fighting men, not an official sanctioned competition. The official bodies in Thailand at that time did not sanction mixed gender competition. She fought men in the specific circuit that exists in every combat sports culture, the informal circuit, where arrangements are made between promoters and fighters, and the official bodies look in a different direction because the events generate revenue and interest that official competition sometimes doesn't. The poster said 143 men. That was the number she had put on it, the career total of men who had accepted the challenge and failed to survive 10 seconds. Some people told me later that the number was inflated, that the real number was closer to 80. I don't know the true number. What I know is that the number was large enough to have become part of her public identity, the number that the poster used to communicate what she was, and that the men I saw fail that Saturday were real, and their failure was real. The challenge format was simple. She stood in the ring. A challenger stepped in. The challenger had 10 seconds to still be standing and not controlled. If they achieved this, they collected 50,000 baht. If they didn't, they went home with a story. The 10 seconds were counted by an official counter who stood at the side of the ring with a large clock. She had put her career earnings into the prize fund. This was the significant thing about the poster, the thing that had stopped me. Not the money itself, though 50,000 baht was substantial. The fact that she had put her own career earnings in. This was a statement about certainty, about what she believed she was. I found a seat in the third bleacher section on the right side of the ring, which gave me a clear sightline to most of the ring floor, and a partial view of the corner where her team set up between challengers. Good seat. I had paid 30 baht and gotten a genuinely good seat, which meant the 30 baht had done more work than I expected. The event started at 2 in the afternoon, with some preliminary bouts between junior fighters that were genuinely competitive and worth watching. These ran until about 3:30, by which point the bleachers were full and the standing area around the ring had filled in, and the specific density of a full indoor sports venue in Bangkok in the rainy season had produced a heat that was its own entity in the room. Then Juanita Srisuk came out. She walked from the back corridor to the ring in the way that serious fighters walk to the ring when they have been doing it for 12 years and have stopped needing to perform the walk. She was wearing the specific combination of traditional and competitive gear that Muay Thai competitors wore in that period, and she moved with the economy of someone for whom every movement had been refined by repetition until waste had been eliminated. She climbed into the ring. The crowd responded with the response she received everywhere she went in Bangkok, which was genuine and respectful, and had in it the specific quality of people acknowledging something they understood to be extraordinary. She did not speak. She did not take a microphone. She warmed up in the ring, while the promoter, a heavy-set man named Kun Boonsong, who I recognized from other events I'd attended, explained the format to the crowd in Thai. The first challenger stepped in. He was a large man, gym-built, the kind of size that produces confidence in people who haven't learned yet what size is and is not sufficient for. He lasted 4 seconds. The technique she used was a short elbow combination that the people near me who knew what they were looking at made a specific sound in response to, the sound of people seeing something precise arrive and connect. The second challenger lasted longer, 6 seconds, and gave her more work than the first. He was a wrestler. You could see it in how he tried to establish grip, and for 6 seconds he had her attention in a way that the first challenger hadn't. Then she used a knee that found the gap his wrestling instinct had left, and he was done. In this way, the afternoon proceeded. By 4:30, she had taken 11 challengers. None of them had collected. I was watching from the third bleacher section, and what I was watching was not primarily the challengers, but her, the way she moved between challengers, the specific quality of her rest state between engagements, the thing about how a fighter handles the space between fights that tells you what they are made of more clearly than the fights themselves. What I saw was a person who was, at 29 years old, at the absolute peak of what 12 years of daily serious training had made them, and who was present in their peak the way very few people are present in anything, completely and without division. I was watching her when I noticed the man in the 5th row of the left bleacher section. He was not large, not tall. He was sitting with a group of 4 or 5 other people, slightly separated from them, in the way of someone who has come to a group event, with a personal agenda, inside the social context. He was watching the ring with the sustained attention of someone who is looking at something specific rather than watching an event generally. He was dressed simply, dark clothing, nothing that drew the eye. Something about the quality of his watching made me notice him. In Bangkok in 1969, Bruce Lee was not famous in the way that he would become famous after Enter the Dragon. What he was known in specific circles, people who trained seriously, people who followed what was happening in Hong Kong cinema, people who had connections to the martial arts world internationally. In those circles, his name meant something. To the general public in Bangkok in 1969, he was not a name. I recognized him because I was in those circles. I had seen photographs. I had heard accounts from people who had been in rooms where he had demonstrated something. I had the specific profile information that serious martial arts people in Bangkok had about him, which was the information that travels through the informal network of practitioners and students and coaches who know each other across countries and disciplines. I looked at him. He was looking at the ring. He did not look at me. I thought about whether to say anything to the people around me. I decided not to. Partly because I wasn't certain enough of the identification to stake anything on it in a crowded venue. Partly because something told me that the quality of his attendance at the event, the stillness of it, the separation from the people around him, was the attendance of someone who had come to watch, and not to be watched, and that announcing his presence would be a violation of whatever purpose had brought him there. I watched him for a while, and then I went back to watching the ring. By 5 o'clock, she had taken 15 challengers, and the energy in the building had shifted into the specific energy of a crowd that has watched enough to have an opinion about what it's watching, which is different from the energy of a crowd still forming its opinion. The opinion the crowd had formed was that Juanita Srisuk was what the poster said she was, and that the 50,000 baht was safe, and that what they were watching was a demonstration of something that deserved the word extraordinary. Then Kun Boonsong took the microphone and said that after a short break, the challenge period would enter its final phase, and that anyone who had not yet stepped in should consider this their last opportunity. And Juanita Srisuk took the microphone. This was unusual. She had not spoken between challengers. She had let the format speak for itself, which was itself a kind of statement. When she took the microphone, the crowd went quieter than it had been all afternoon, the quiet of people recognizing a change in the pattern. She spoke in Thai, and I will translate as accurately as my memory allows, 50 years later, which means the words are not exact, but the meaning is as close as I can get it. She said, "I want to say something to everyone here today before we finish. I want to say it while there are still people here who haven't stepped in, so they can hear it before they decide." She looked at the crowd. The specific scan of a person who has been reading rooms for 12 years and is reading this one, she said. "In Thailand, we have a tradition. We know what real fighting is. We have built it over centuries. What I do here today is part of that tradition, real training, real contact, real results against real people who are actually trying." She paused. She said, "I have been hearing recently about martial arts from outside Thailand. From America especially. I hear about kung fu and karate, and these styles that are getting attention now because of films, and because Hollywood has decided that fighting is good for business. I hear names. Muhammad Ali, who is a boxer and who is real in his own discipline. But I also hear names of people who are famous for fighting in films, and I think about what that means. She looked at the crowd. She said, "There is a man named Bruce Lee who is making films in Hong Kong about kung fu. I have seen footage. What I have seen is impressive for a film. And I want to say directly, if you take someone who fights for films and put them in a ring like this one, with someone who has trained every day for 12 years against people who are actually trying to beat them, what you get is what you have seen today. 15 men, none of them collected." She paused. She said, "I am saying this because I want the people here to understand what they are watching. This is real. Not a film, not Hollywood. Real." She lowered the microphone. The crowd applauded. The approval of people who believed what they had just heard and were expressing the belief. And from the fifth row of the left bleacher section, a hand went up. I saw it before most of the crowd did. I was already watching that section. The hand went up cleanly. No hesitation. No performance of the gesture. Just a hand, going up in the way a hand goes up when someone in a room wants to speak. It was the man in the dark clothing. The crowd around him turned to look. Kun Boonsong, from his position near the ring, looked toward the raised hand. Juanita Srisuk, who had been watching the crowd's response to her speech, found the hand. She looked at it. She looked at the person attached to it. She did the assessment that fighters do when they look at potential challengers, the quick professional read of size and bearing, and the various signals that a body sends about what it is and what it has done. She read 5'7", maybe 140 pounds, in dark civilian clothing that revealed nothing about what was underneath it. She said, into the microphone, "Yes." He stood up. He was smaller than most of the challengers she had taken that afternoon. The crowd read this immediately, the collective size comparison that happens when someone new enters the frame of attention, and the crowd's response to the reading was the response of people who were not sure what to make of what they were seeing. Not laughter, not dismissal, uncertainty. He made his way from the fifth row to the aisle, and from the aisle to the ring steps, and up the ring steps, and the way he moved through those transitions is something I watched with the complete attention I had been using all afternoon for things worth watching completely. He moved the way he moved. I know that is not a description that helps you if you have never seen it, but it is the only accurate description I have. There is a specific quality to movement that has been refined over many years of serious training that is visible to people who know what they are looking at. And from the third bleacher section I was far enough away that I couldn't see details but close enough that I could see the quality. The quality was there. Juanita Srisuk looked at him across the ring. She said something to him in Thai. "I heard it," she said. "I haven't seen you at events before. Where are you from?" He said, in accented Thai that was functional rather than fluent. "Hong Kong." She processed this. She said, "What style?" He said, "My own." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, to the crowd, with the specific tone of someone making a comment they expect the crowd to enjoy, "We have a challenger from Hong Kong. He says he has his own style." The crowd responded. Some laughter, good-natured, the laughter of a crowd that is enjoying itself and has been enjoying itself for 3 hours and is ready for more. She looked at him. She said, "All right, 10 seconds. Same rules as everyone else." Kun Boonsong said, into the microphone, "Challenger from Hong Kong. 10 seconds, begin when I say begin." The crowd settled. Kun Boonsong said, "Begin." What happened in the next 3 seconds, I am going to describe as carefully as I can, because the description is the thing, and the thing deserves care. She moved first. Juanita Srisuk had a specific opening pattern that I had watched her use across 15 challengers, a front kick to establish distance, followed by a right teep that was both a measurement and the beginning of a combination. It was a real technique at real speed, not a demonstration, the opening of a serious fighter who had learned how to begin a fight in a way that gave them information about the challenger while also establishing her in an advantageous position. He was not where the front kick aimed. From the third bleacher section I watched the kick arrive, and the kick was fast, and the kick was real, and the kick arrived in the space where he had been, and he was not there. He had moved, and the movement was the quality I described, the thing that is visible as a quality rather than as a specific action. Before, after, the transition not visible. His hands made contact. I could not see the specifics from my distance. I could see the result. Juanita Srisuk stepped back. Not fell, not stumbled. Stepped back, 1 step, 2. The forced retreat of someone whose attack has met something that changed the direction of the attack. She stopped. The crowd was very quiet. She looked at him. He was standing where he had been, hands lowered, looking at her with the complete attention he had been using all afternoon for the ring. She said, "That's not right." He said, "What's not right?" She said, You moved before I kicked. He said, yes. She said, you can't do that before the signal. He said, the signal was begin. I moved after begin. She said, you moved before I initiated. He said, you initiated. I responded. The crowd murmured, not hostility, the specific murmur of 800 people processing an argument they are following closely. Kun Boonsong said something about restarting. She nodded. He said restart. She came again. She came differently. Not the front kick opening. Something more direct, the attempt of a fighter who has recalibrated after the first approach didn't work the way she expected, coming with the forward pressure and the elbow combination that had finished 3 of the 15 challengers. He moved through it. I use that phrase because it is the only phrase that describes what I saw accurately. He moved through the combination the way you move through a crowd, not away from any individual part of it, through the collective of it, finding the spaces between the pieces, and the contacts he made were the contacts that redirected the committed momentum of each piece in the direction of the floor. She went down on one knee. The crowd reacted, bigger than any previous reaction of the afternoon, bigger than anything the 15 previous challengers had produced, the reaction of 800 people watching something that exceeded the calibration they'd been building all afternoon. She was up in under 3 seconds. The automatic speed of someone for whom the floor is a place you pass through rather than a place you stop, she said. His technique is illegal. He said, what technique? She said, joint manipulation. You used joint manipulation. That's not in the rules. He said, I used position and redirection. Show me the rule I violated. She said, the spirit of the format is striking exchange, not manipulation, he said. The format is survive 10 seconds. I survived 10 seconds twice. You went down twice. Kun Boonsong was in the ring now, the intervention of a promoter who has watched his event become something he didn't plan for and is trying to find a framework for it. He said something about the format, about the intent, about the spirit of the challenge. The challenger said, in his accented Thai, clearly enough for the section of the crowd nearest the ring to hear, I'll do it again. Any way she wants, she said. Again. Same as the first 2. Begin. He said. All right. She came a third time. And the third time she came, without any of the pattern, without any of the opening structure that 12 years of competition had built into her, as reflexive. She came the way people come when technique has not worked 3 times, and what's left is the forward pressure of someone who has decided that what didn't work in structure might work in directness. He moved, and he touched, and she went to the floor again. Not hard, not hurt, but floor, 3 times. She stood up. She said, this is not right. He said, I know. She said, what does that mean? He said, it means you're right, that something isn't right. It's just not what you think it is. She looked at him. He said, what's not right is the rules you're using to protect yourself from what's happening. The crowd went very quiet. He said, the first time, you said I moved before you kicked. I didn't. The second time, you said I used illegal manipulation. I didn't. The third time, there were no specific objections, which means the objections aren't about the rules, they're about what's happening. She said, what do you think is happening? He said, you've built something extraordinary over 12 years. I've watched you work all afternoon. What you've built is real, but you've built it in the specific context of Muay Thai, against opponents who move the way Muay Thai opponents move. When I move differently from what Muay Thai prepares you for, you can't locate me. That's not a failure of your training, it's the edge of it. If you think that was the most confrontational thing said in that ring that afternoon, what happened in the next 60 seconds will show you that you had not yet seen the most confrontational thing. She said, you're saying my training has limits. He said, every training has limits. That's not an insult, that's physics, she said. And yours doesn't, he said. Mine has different limits. I've spent 15 years specifically trying to find what those limits are and push them. I'm not finished. I'll be doing it until I die. She said, you're saying you're better than me. He said, I'm saying we're in different contexts and you've encountered the edge of yours. She said, that's the same thing. He said, it isn't. But I understand why it feels like it is. She was quiet. Her chest was rising and falling with the controlled breath of someone managing a state rather than letting it manage them. Her trainer, who had been in the corner all afternoon, said something to her in Thai that I didn't catch. She said, I'm going to ask you something directly. He said, please. She said, why are you here? You didn't come here to take the challenge. You came to watch. He said, yes. She said, so why did you raise your hand? He said, because you said something on the microphone that wasn't accurate, about films and Hollywood and what's real. You were making a point about the difference between real training and performed training. The point is worth making. But you included names you don't have enough information about to include. She said, you're defending yourself. He said, I'm correcting a claim made with insufficient information. She said, you're Bruce Lee. He said, yes. The crowd, which had heard this exchange and had been following it, produced the specific sound that a crowd produces when a piece of information they have been trying to place for 20 minutes suddenly places itself. She looked at him. She said, I've seen footage of your work. He said, I know what the footage shows. She said, and. He said, and the footage shows a fraction of what the training is. That's a problem I live with. The fraction is what's available to be seen. The training is what's actually there. She said, and what's in the training that isn't in the footage? He said, what you just felt. 3 times. She was quiet. And if you think the quiet was the moment the afternoon completed itself, you were not there for what happened after the quiet. The crowd had been quiet with her. 800 people in a covered sports complex in Bangkok, collectively waiting for what came after the quiet, and what Juanita Srisuk said after the quiet was something that told you who she was, under the 12 years of competition and the career earnings on the line and the 143 men on the poster. She said, I said some things on that microphone about Hollywood and fake fighters. I said your name. He waited. She said, I said it without knowing what I know now. She said it simply, not as a performance of humility, as a statement of fact. He said, you said what the footage suggested. She said, the footage suggested something incomplete. He said, yes. She said, and now I know it's incomplete. He said, yes. She was quiet again. Then she said, I need to think about what that means for how I talk about this. He nodded, the small nod. He turned toward the ropes. What happened next happened fast enough that the crowd's reaction was still forming when it was already over. She moved, not toward the ropes, toward him. From behind, the grab of someone who has not finished and whose body has made a decision before the mind fully authorized it. She grabbed his right shoulder, both hands, the grip of someone with 12 years of conditioning in her hands, a real grip, the kind that when it closes means something. He turned. The turn was contained in the grip, which sounds impossible, but is what I saw. He turned within the grip the way something turns in a socket, using the grip rather than fighting it, and the direction of the turn introduced a direction into the grip that the grip hadn't accounted for, and her hands were no longer on his shoulder, but following a momentum they hadn't intended. She stumbled forward. He caught her, not dramatically, not with any emphasis, his hands at her forearms, steady, the catch of someone who has produced a stumble and is not interested in the stumble becoming a fall. She straightened. She looked at him. Her hands were still in his, or near his, the specific physical proximity of a moment that had just been more complicated than either of them had planned. The security personnel had moved during the grab. 3 men in the specific green shirts that the sports complex used for event security were now at the ring apron, and one of them had his hand on the ropes, the posture of someone about to climb in. The crowd was very loud. She said quietly enough that only the people nearest the ring heard it, which included me in the 3rd bleacher section because I had moved forward during the exchange. I wasn't done. He said, I know. She said, I grabbed you. He said, yes. She said, I'm sorry about that. He said, the conversation wasn't finished. Your body answered for you before you finished it. She looked at him. She said, what's the rest of the conversation? He said, the rest of the conversation is, what you've built here is real. The 50,000 baht, and the challenge, and the 150 men. The reputation, real. The training, real. What I'd want you to take from today is that real has more than one form, and encountering another form of it doesn't reduce what you've built, it just adds information. She was quiet. The security personnel were in the ring now. The one who had been at the apron, and 2 others who had come up the steps. And Kun Boonsong was in the ring. The crowd was still loud, but had changed character. The loud of people who are uncertain about what they're watching, rather than the loud of people responding to something they understand. Juanita Srisuk stepped back from the security personnel. She put her hands up, the universal gesture of someone who is not going to require physical management and is communicating this. She looked at the challenger. She said, in Thai, loudly enough for the front section of the crowd to hear, this man didn't come here to take the challenge. He came to watch. He raised his hand because I said something on that microphone that he wanted to respond to. And what he showed me is something I didn't know I needed to see. She looked at the crowd. She said, the money stays, the challenge stays. What I said on the microphone about films and Hollywood and names I used, I need to revise some of that. Because I said it with less information than I should have had. The crowd received this. Murmuring, the specific processing murmur of a crowd, taking in something unexpected. She looked at him one more time. She said, "Where do you train?" He said, "Los Angeles, mostly." "And wherever I find something worth training with," she said. "This was worth training with." He said, "Yes, what you built here is worth any serious practitioner's time." She nodded. He climbed out of the ring. The security personnel watched him go. Kun Boonsong watched him go. I watched him go from the third bleacher section, the same section I had been in since 2 o'clock, and he walked through the crowd toward the exit the same way he had walked in, without emphasis, without any of the things that famous people sometimes do, to communicate that they have done something. He was at the exit, before most of the crowd had registered that the moment was over. I sat in the third bleacher section for a while after the event ended. Around me, people were filing out and talking, and the room was doing what rooms do when something that happened in them has given them more than the program promised. I sat, and I didn't talk to anyone. I thought about the poster on the wall outside the Chattachak market, and the 30 baht, and the specific sequence of events that had connected those two things to what I had just watched. I thought about the man in the 5th row whose quality of watching I had noticed before I knew who he was. I thought about Juanita Srisuk saying this was worth training with, and him saying, "Yes, what you built here is worth any serious practitioner's time." I walked home that evening. It took about 40 minutes. I thought about what I had seen the whole way. I am 82 years old. I have been in a lot of rooms over 82 years, and I have watched a lot of things happen in them. The sports complex near the old stadium in Bangkok in the spring of 1969 is the room I think about most. Not because of the physical things, though the physical things were extraordinary. Because of what Juanita Srisuk said on the microphone after the security personnel had come into the ring, and after the crowd had been loud, and after the grab had happened and been resolved. She said, "What I said on the microphone about films and Hollywood and names I used, I need to revise some of that." 800 people in a hot-covered venue in Bangkok in 1969. She could have said nothing. She could have let the security personnel manage the situation and moved on to the next challenger, and let the afternoon end in the way it was scheduled to end. She had the microphone and the event and the career earnings on the line and the 150 men on the poster, and none of those things required her to say anything further about what had happened. She said it anyway. That is the thing I have thought about the most. Not the 3 times on the floor, though those were worth thinking about, the choice she made after, with the microphone, with the crowd watching. That choice. Bruce Lee died 4 years after that Saturday. He was 32 years old. I heard the news in Bangkok, and I sat where I was sitting when I heard it, and I thought about the 5th row of the left bleacher section and the quality of the watching, and the hand going up, and what he had said when she accused him of doing something illegal the first time, and the second time, and the third time, and what he had said when she grabbed him from behind. I know. He said I know to a lot of things that afternoon, about what she was, about what she had built, about why she wasn't done, about the conversation that her body had answered before she had finished it. I know. Said with the specific quality of someone who has been reading a situation completely and has understood each piece of it as it arrived. I paid 30 baht in 1969 for a seat in the third bleacher section at a sports complex near the old stadium in Bangkok. I have been thinking about the 30 bahts worth since 1969. I am still not finished thinking about it. That's the whole story.